In any case, though, it does occur to me that I would make the argument that women are more promiscuous than men are.
Okay, why? Because it's self-evident?
Well, it's, for starters, women have more access to hookup culture than do men.
Okay, but that access is clearly not resulting in them actually doing it by any of these surveys or any of these. And also, if women have all these options, if men had the amount of options women have, you don't think they would be far more promiscuous than we're being?
But they don't.
Yeah, but women are not.
Which would suggest
women
that
aren't
hypergamy
using,
is alive and well.
But women aren't using those options. We're seeing. Like, that's the thing. You're saying they have the options, but the options isn't translating to their behavior. Where do you have it? So they may have more options. Now, link that to the conclusion you're trying to make. Just because they have more options, they are therefore more promiscuous? Or don't we have a gap there that we need to fill a premise?
What you basically have is there's a small proportion of men, for example, on Tinder, and they have done studies on Tinder when it comes to the breakdown of who's getting swiped on, who's not. So you have a very small proportion of men that get something like 80%, 90% of all the attention on dating apps. Mm-hmm. So it's a very small pool of men that get all the attention. So what you're going to end up having, for example, is, and I think this is one, so you basically have like a small proportion of men that are very promiscuous, that have a high partner count, but then you have a greater proportion of women that don't have quite as high of a body count as do the men.
Well, again, if you're looking at just dating app swipes, that's different. But if you're looking at how people actually behave and their behavior, like I said, it does seem to be, because if you reverse it, it does also seem like 20% of women are sleeping with 80%. That's not true. What's happening is really that there's like 20% of the population, or maybe a little less, maybe a little more, that are more promiscuous, and that's what's contributing to this. Also on dating apps, I think it's like there's like 3 or 4 times as many men on there as women, and that's obviously going to conflate this. There's no actual real life scenario where there's like five men for each woman, unless you're in like a specific niche.
Sure,
area.
Which makes it even more difficult for men.
I agree, it makes it more difficult, but I don't think it makes women more promiscuous, because that's the thing you're arguing. I do think men have it hard, but I don't think that translates to women are now more promiscuous, because men on average have more partners.
There's more promiscuous women than there are men.
The stats show them both like around the same. It seems like there's 20% of people that are just fucking each other, and the rest of us are just like with.
I don't believe it's a 1-to-1 thing. Basically,
if it's not a 1-to-1 thing, more men are having more sex than women are. Like a
smaller proportion of men are having more sex than women are.
Well, so from what you're showing me, it seems like the majority, both men and women, are having, and I said this, over 80% of us are having sex with either 0 or 1 person. And then once you start getting to 2 to 4 partners, you start getting to way more men have.
What the fuck?
Yeah, there's a fly behind you. More men are having a lot of partners than women are. So I don't know how you're concluding that women are more promiscuous.
Simply by virtue of their accessibility to.
But that accessibility isn't translating to behavior.
It is, though.
How? Because the stats all show that's all happening. How is that? So tell me how it's translating.
If you have more capability to do something, then you're much more likely to enact on it.
So your argument is premise 1, women have more capability, conclusion, therefore women are more promiscuous. You're missing the middle. So premise 2 would have to be women are acting on this accessibility, therefore women are more promiscuous. You don't have that second premise. That second premise is not borne out by what we're seeing in the behavior.
Well, it's hard because any of the stats I've seen about this, they just give like an average. They don't give like a mean, median, mode kind of breakdown.
That was base donated $99. All right. Someone shut off Barney's mic for the night. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
I mean, Brian is directing a lot of the questions to me. I don't mind being muted for the rest of the time. It's late, and I think we're ending soon, so I'm all for it.
Well, I guess the only thing I'd say about the promiscuity is that if we take being promiscuous as like a personality attribute and give it to 20% of the population, it's more likely that the 20% of the female population who is promiscuous is actually going to be able to go out and sleep with someone than the 20% of the male population, right?
So, but then I think that would bear out in the data in the sense of then men would.
It's hard because the averages might still be the same.
So you think the top promiscuous woman is having way more sex than the top promiscuous man?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think if a woman is promiscuous, she's able to sleep with way more men than if a man is promiscuous.
So like an NBA player, Drake, like if we're looking at the top, so he's not having, so women are Because
Yeah, but it's like for someone to be at the top, you chose Drake or but for a woman to be getting sex to be and being promiscuous, she just basically needs to be a woman.
Because when we also look at body count, the ones at the very top are men, like that are sleeping with hundreds and hundreds of people. There are more men doing that than there are women doing that. So that has been shown. So I don't necessarily know what we're comparing here.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is hard, right? Because we're comparing people who are promiscuous and then men versus women, and then the number that
the highest body counts are obtained by men. And then we look at averages, men on average also have more. So I don't know where we're drawing this conclusion that all we have is the accessibility argument, and that hasn't translated to anything we've seen in behavior other than Brian's feelings.
Well, I mean, I don't need a study, for example, to know that, and I think you would actually agree with me here, that it's easier for women to get laid.
It's easier for women to get laid, but women aren't as interested in just getting laid with as many people.
Is that so? You think so?
As men are, yeah. I mean, this is an argument you would make. Men are they're less sexually selective. So I think women, you guys are kind of jealous of something we don't even want, which is that like a lot of men like want to fuck us. Like we're like, okay. And you guys are putting yourself like, oh, I wish I had that because I would fuck all these men. Okay, but we're not doing that just because they're all in our DMs.
Well, it's not actually, well, it's not clear to me that I think there's plenty of women that engage in hookup culture, and they are...
it's a minority of people on both ends. Now, maybe more men would want to. That's true. If they could, I agree with that. But women, even though they can, most of them still aren't.
I don't think that's true.
That's what the data says, and that's so... I know you don't...
I haven't seen your data.
Well, can I pull it up? I mean, you're just denying, like, this is what's happening, is that most women aren't taking these opportunities. You guys think just because we're out on the street and all these men would have sex with us, you guys know that women are, you guys say in the same breath, women are very selective. They only want to this type of man. And then in the same breath, you're saying, oh, but they're everybody and they're super promiscuous. I mean.
Yeah, there's rampant promiscuity.
And where are you getting that from? Because most people seem to just have one partner and they're having sex.
Most people have just one
I just
partner.
said over 80% in that GSS study. If you actually go into it and they start differentiating between partners, you find that the majority of people, when they say, have you had sex in the past year? They've had sex with one partner. They're in relationships or they're in marriages.
No, the data actually shows that there's I think it's 20% of women, if we're going based off of the Pew research that's been done, that 20% of women are, whether they know it or not, are actually in some sort of polyamorous situation. In other words, they're sharing a guy.
But they're still sleeping with that one guy thinking they're in a relationship. So how is that evidence of promiscuity? In fact, wouldn't it be the opposite?
No, well, because then you have a smaller then you have men who are getting no access to sex.
That's true, and I think that at times that men get no access to sex, it's probably because they want it, but they can't get it. Whereas when women, because there are more women that aren't having sex, they're choosing. You can make that argument, but there are more women, except in 2018, that aren't having sex than men, and you could argue that's by choice. But if you're saying women are more promiscuous, then that probably wouldn't be the case, right?
What wouldn't be the case?
That women are choosing not to have sex more than men are, if they're super promiscuous.
Well, I would have to see the new GSS.
Well, you just
data.
said the GSS. What does the new GSS study show? That there are more sexless men or sexless women? Because except for 2018, it generally shows that women are more sexless than men, and they're doing so by choice. And you're saying because they have all these options.
It's not clear to me that there's truth to that, though. I mean,
well,
how would you, for example, explain the incidence of men who, for example, are incels?
Yes, I do think there is a small portion of men, and
no woman could be an incel.
I agree, but that doesn't mean that because there are men that are incels and women that no woman could be an incel, that women are more promiscuous. I don't see how that is related to that. It's like how is that more?
I feel like from the women that I know, at least, they typically, like, if it's a woman who does want to engage in casual sex, she typically wants to find like a guy that can just be like a hookup partner. She doesn't typically want to like sleep around, and that's typically pretty easy to find, like a guy who's willing to do that, obviously. But yeah, I don't find that like many women just want to like sleep around and get all these like guys, whereas the opposite I think is true for men. sometimes.
Women generally are sexless by choice, and for some men it's by choice, but for a lot of men it's not by choice, which is counter to your argument that women are more promiscuous, because so many of them are choosing, I think you could argue all women are choosing to not have a higher body count than they already have, because we all have the opportunity to.
But okay, hold on. Okay. The thing is a lot of men by necessity have to be monogamous. Because
Okay, so wouldn't they be, so, and women don't, but most women still are, so aren't they less promiscuous?
No, because if you're unable, as a guy, if you are unable to act on your desires to actually secure sexual access from a lot of women, then
Yeah, so therefore women are more promiscuous. So you're making arguments that I don't think support your conclusion.
Wait,
So,
when you say that women are more promiscuous, do you mean that they're actually having sex, whereas men are not more promiscuous, not necessarily because they don't want to have sex, but because they're actually not able to find the partners that women are? Like, is that how you're defining promiscuity?
So if
how are you
men-
defining promiscuity?
If men were capable of getting sex very easily, then I would say yes, more men would be promiscuous. However, very few men are capable of engaging in promiscuity. So I would argue that there are more women who are promiscuous, successfully promiscuous, than there are men.
And I don't think that's not borne out anywhere. That's all I'm saying. It doesn't seem that women, even though they have the opportunity, they don't seem to be taking those opportunities. And yeah, it's true that there are more sexless men who don't have options, but that doesn't support the conclusion, therefore, that women are more promiscuous.
But if it has to be acted upon.
And women aren't acting
So
upon this access.
if there was equality in the sexual marketplace, then yes, men would be more promiscuous, because that's men's sexual strategy, is to just sleep with a whole bunch of women.